What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another retro Yu-Gi-Oh video. And today we've got one that, may not be as interesting as playing the big fusion combo deck, but is one that I think is worth covering, as it goes over some of the best decks in this format that we've got here, which I used to call Chaser format. It's recently been brought to my attention that can have some negative connotations, so I'm just going to call it TP1 format from here on out. It's the same format as what I was calling Chaser format. It's just got a different name now, and it's, I think, a more straightforward name as well, as some people were confused exactly what Chaser format covers. It just covers everything up to TP1. So I think that this name change is good. If you want to keep calling it Chaser format, you can. This is just what I'll be calling it going forward. The format's also small enough that I don't think that many people will play it, and so I think that this change of name doesn't really matter too much in the long term. So, TP1 format. It's got the very cool fusion deck, but what other decks are in it? Well, honestly, the new fusion deck is basically the main spice that gets introduced. There will be one extra spicy deck that I'll be covering next video, so look forward to that. But in the meantime, the standard good stuff from Critter format is still good here. So in this video, I'm going to be showing that off. And we're going to start off showing off an Exodia deck. I know Exodia, it's not the most entertaining deck to watch, but, it is a very good deck in Critter, so stands to reason it might be good in TP1 format. So we'll have to see if it is. But before we dive into that, if you enjoy this sort of retro Yu-Gi-Oh content, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. We are at around 330 subscribers, which is really awesome. We've really gone up in the past couple of weeks. Really exciting to see. It would be awesome if we could hit 400 in this month of January coming up. So if you like my stuff, please be sure to subscribe and help us reach that milestone. And of course, if you like this video, please be sure to like it on YouTube as always. But with that out of the way, let's dive in to this Exodia build. Honestly, there isn't much different in this build from the last Exodia build that I showed off in Critter format, which was this Big Eye Exodia deck. The main deck is exactly the same. The big thing is that when you smoke screen in to your aggressive side deck, I swapped out the logins for mechanical chasers, as this is the new premier beater in TP1 format. So if you haven't seen the deck, let's just dive into a bit of how it works. Basically, your game plan in game 1 is to win through Exodia. So you've got all 5 pieces of Exodia that you want to get to hand, and you can very easily search these out with recruiters like Sangan and Witch, of which you have 4 in the deck, which enables you to do some pretty fun combos that can produce pretty explosive turns, getting a bunch of pieces to hand all at once, and potentially winning the game out of nowhere. So we've of course got the 4 recruiters. We also have these 2K defenders to stall for a bit when we can't set up the explosive turns right away. These are very, very important, and a lot of decks can have difficulty outing these. We also have 3 Thunder Dragon, which both thins down our deck a little bit and can also allow us to trigger our recruiters by tributing over them. It can also let us trigger things like Last Will, which can be very powerful at getting out more recruiters. So all in all, Thunder Dragon is a really awesome card in this deck, and a card with a lot of interesting uses here. We also have 2 Magician of Faith. This can be great at recycling your Power 5 limited spells, but it can also be great at recycling things like Swords of Revealing Light to stall for a bit longer, or Last Will to pull off an even bigger combo. So Magician of Faith is a very, very versatile and good card here. And lastly, for the monsters, we have Big Eye, which isn't really played outside of this deck, and is honestly not even played in all builds of this deck, but I really like in this deck, as it lets you basically dig 5 cards deeper into your deck, know what's coming up, plan ahead for that, and if you need to shuffle up your deck a bit afterwards because you don't have many good cards coming up, this deck has a lot of different ways to do that. You can even discard a Thunder Dragon and potentially even fail to find a Thunder Dragon in your deck to just shuffle up the top cards of your deck to get you better draws in the future. But hopefully that won't be necessary. Moving on to the spells, we of course have the Power 5 limited spells, Change of Heart, Dark Hole, Monster Reborn, Pot of Greed, Raigeki, all insanely strong. We have 1 Fisher to act as even more removal. We have 2 Last Will to bring out the recruiters and do the crazy combo plays that I mentioned before. We have 2 Swords of Revealing Light to stall our opponent for a bit while we bide our time and gather the pieces that we need. And for the traps, we have 1 Mirror Force, as that card's just crazy in this format. We have 3 Solemn Judgment, as we want to shut down any of our opponent's big plays, and this can also be very good at stopping things like card destruction that can basically cause you to instantly lose the game. We also have 3 Trap Hole, as we want to stop as much of our opponent's offensive pressure as possible. And lastly, we have 3 Uboku to protect our monsters and our life points if we need them. This can be great. It can also chain to heavy, which is very, very important in this format. Moving on to the side deck in games 2 and potentially 3, we have the option to side into a bit more of an aggressive strategy to throw our opponent off. If they side in heavy Exodia hate, we can catch them by surprise and potentially take the game from them. So we have 1 Cannon Soldier to deal that last bit of damage to your opponent and finish them off, an additional Magician of Faith to recycle your powerful spells even more, 2 Mass Sorcerer to get in draws once you've cleared your opponent's board, 3 Muka Muka, as you can go into a bit of a Muka Muka turbo deck, which is pretty good. We have 1 White Magical Hat, which you can bring out off of the last wills. And of course, the new card from TP1, Mechanical Chaser, which has the highest attack on a vanilla beater in the format. We also have 2 Fisher Deck to even more removal and 2 Heavy Storms to enable us to make super aggressive pushes. We do have a Fusion deck here. It's completely unnecessary. There's no way we can go into it. It's just for the mind games. But if you want to know a bit more about how this deck works and the ins and outs of it, you can always check out my previous video that I did on it in Critter format, as it's essentially the same deck. But with all that out of the way, let's dive into a duel showing off how this deck works in TP1 format. Okay, we've got a game against Aratos, who is a very, very good duelist in Critter format, and those skills do carry over into TP1 format. So this will hopefully be a pretty good duel. Unclear what they're playing, but we're on the Exodia deck, so let's see how that does for us. They will win the rock, paper, scissors, so they will be able to go first. Kind of unfortunate, but not the worst for us. As a note, the mind games in this format with the Fusion deck are actually very important, as there is that rogue Fusion deck with the Fusion substitutes that a lot of people are playing. So you want to have the full Fusion deck to sort of bluff that if possible. So we don't actually know whether they're on the Fusion deck or not, even though they have a 15-card Fusion deck. But we'll have to see. They're just going to set 2, pass back to us. And we've got a couple options here. We could just go defensive with the Giant Soldier of Stone. We could set a Witch as a recruiter. Or we could go for the Big Eye just to dig deeper into our deck. Looks like we're going to set the Stone, set a Waboku, pass back to them. We don't want to reveal that we're on Exodia for as long as possible. So this is the best way to do that. They're just going to set another, pass back to us. We draw a second piece of Exodia, which honestly isn't that bad. If we can keep drawing pieces, we've got the Witch in hand to make a big play later. We're just going to set a Big Eye here. Yes, this does play a bit into Raigeki. If they do Raigeki our board, then we'll be very sad here. But, we just got to play into it. They've got 2 monsters on field, so it's unlikely that they're going to Dark Hole this board. And if they do Raigeki our board away, we at least have the Waboku to protect our life points from a big aggressive push here. They're just going to pass back to us, though, and we draw a Witch. So we're just going to actually summon out... Oh, that was a misclick, I guess. We are going to set the Witch. That makes a lot more sense. We want to just keep on the defensive here. This also safeguards against if they have a Raigeki, we get to add a monster to hand. And we're going to pass back to them with a set that could be anything. And they're going to pass back to us. And we draw a Reborn, so we're feeling very good here. If we can clear both our Witches and then Reborn a third, then we just get all Exodia pieces to hand and potentially win the game from that. So we're going to set our last Witch. If they Raigeki us, we're perfectly fine with that. And they're just going to set one, pass back to us. We have Pot of Greed, so we're going to go for that. You could argue that maybe we should have flipped up the Big Eye first and then Pot of Greeded. But I think, honestly, that's a bit greedy, as then that will reveal that we are on Exodia. And I don't think we need to do that yet. We get a third piece to hand, and now we don't even need the Reborn Recruiter shenanigans, as if our 2 Witches die here, we just win the game. As long as they don't, card destruction us or something, which would be very unfortunate. But let's just hope they don't have that. They're going to discard a Thunder Dragon, add 2 Thunder Dragons to hand, so this means that they're likely either on Exodia themselves, or on the fun Fusion substitute deck. Unclear though at this point. They're going to flip up a Witch and activate Polymerization. So they are on the Fusion substitute deck, which is very fun. They're going to bring out a twin-headed Thunder Dragon here. Very fun. Attack into a Witch. And we are going to add a Sangan, as we do have the Reborn to bring back a Witch and attack into their twin-headed Thunder Dragon. We could also just summon out Sangan next turn, flip up our remaining Witch on field, and attack into the Witch. I mean, we've got a bunch of different options here to get those final 2 pieces to hand. And if they do have a card destruction, we don't want them to activate it right now. They're going to attack into our other set, and it's a Giant Soldier of Stone. So they will take 9 from that. We draw a Sword of Divine Light, but we don't really need to activate it. We'll just summon out Sangan, flip up Witch, and try and win the game here. If they've got Robin Goblin, this is very unfortunate for us. I think we will have to use the Wuboku on that. But if they don't, we just win the game here. So we'll take 100 from that, add 1 piece to hand, and then we're going to try and crash into the Witches, and we will add the 5th piece to hand. So unfortunately, the Fusion deck couldn't get aggressive enough early enough to outdo the Exodia deck. So that's going to be game 1. And for game 2, it's unclear whether we want to actually side into a more aggressive deck or whether we want to keep it on Exodia. Exodia was just so dominating game 1. But because Exodia was so dominating, I feel like they are going to side in some Exodia hate here. So I think we can feel safe siding into the more aggressive strategy. So I think that is what we're going to do. And let's see if we can continue to beat the Fusion deck in game 2. You know, it's kind of unfortunate to see like just a pretty meta deck like Exodia curb stomp a rogue deck like the Fusion Substitute deck, but hopefully the Fusion Substitute deck will be able to show off a bit in game 2 here. We did indeed side into the more aggressive strategy as we've got the Muka and the Heavy there, and they're just going to set 2 and pass. We're going to bring out Muka. That will get Trap Hold. I think we actually made a major error here. I think we should have Heavy Stormed first and then summoned out the Muka, as we've got an additional Heavy Storm in hand, so no real reason not to. But unfortunately, we do go for this play, and we do get punished for it. We're going to set a Trap Hole. Again, maybe a bit of a misplay. If they don't bring out any monsters we want to Trap Hole, then if we want to ever Heavy, we'll have to sort of lose out on our Trap Hole, potentially. So not the best here. And they're going to attack in Witch. So we are going to take 11 from that. They're going to set 1 pass back to us. We draw another Magician of Faith, and we've got no good spells in Grave. We could Fisher the Witch, which would feel really bad. But I guess if we Fisher the Witch, they probably get like a Mechanical Chaser or something to hand. We can Trap Hole that, clear the way for our Heavies. So it's not the worst thing in the world. So we are going to clear the Witch that way. They just get a Sangan, which is not the best for us. If we have to Trap Hole Sangan, that will be very unfortunate. They're just going to flip up the Magician of Faith. We will add a Fisher to hand here. They're going to bring out a Sangan, and we will actually Trap Hole it. The reason being that now we can Heavy Storm their board away, which is honestly pretty good for us, as if we draw a monster to get more aggressive here, we can make a pretty big push. They're going to add a Fusion Substitute to hand, and they're going to activate Last Will, so they're going to be able to keep the aggressive pressure going here. Kind of unfortunate as our Heavies aren't as good now, and they have the read that we are on Heavy now, which is kind of rough. We're just going to set the Wuboku pass, as we don't really have any spells engraved that we want to get here. We could Fisher away their Sangan and set the Magician of Faith, but I don't honestly think that's good. I think we can bide our time for a little bit here. And Areta's just going to attack in with the Sangan for 1,000. So that's perfectly fine by us. They're going to set 1 pass back to us. We're going to Pot of Greed, see what we get here. And we draw Thunder Dragon, so we can discard the Thunder Dragon. Add 2 more Thunder Dragons to hand here. And we could just set the Sangan, maybe. That might be the best move. Looks like we're going to set the Faith. I guess to get back the Pot of Greed. I don't know how I feel about this. I think maybe the Sangan would have been the safer play. But we'll have to see what they do here. They are just going to attack into our set. So it looks like we get rewarded for our risky play. We're going to get back the pot and potentially go for it next turn. They're going to activate Reborn. Reborn a Witch. And that's a bit worrying, but I think we're fine here. Oh, that's why they did it. They're going to get back the Reborn, so that way we won't be able to stop them from getting Magician of Faith from getting value. And they get a monster to hand here if we clear the Witch. We're going to think about what we want to do here. We could activate Heavy, summon up Mass Sorcerer, try and get him for damage. We could also just set the Mass Sorcerer. If they attack into it with their Recruiters, then we get to draw a card here. Either way, we don't have to activate Pot of Greed here, and I honestly think we shouldn't, as we'd be way over the hand limit at the end of the turn here if we did do that. So we can save it for a bit. If they have card destruction or something, that's obviously unfortunate, But I think in the meantime, we don't actually need to play the pot. We're going to set a heavy. If they heavy this, then that's kind of unfortunate, but we will be able to chain the Wuboku, and we do have another heavy in hand. And we had to set something as we were at hand limit at the end of the turn there. They're just going to switch the Witch to attack, switch their other monsters to defense, and attack into our set, and that's honestly perfect for us. We get a draw here, and it's Raigeki, which is pretty nice. They're going to set one pass back to us. It's Mechanical Chaser. We could just get pretty aggressive here. We could Raigeki their board away if we so wish, and it looks like we do so wish. So they will be able to get 2 monsters to hand here, but we can get a pretty aggressive push in if we want it. And it looks like we do want it. This is playing into Mirror Force a little bit, so kind of iffy. But it looks like we're just going to go for it anyways. And it does succeed, so we'll be able to draw from that. We're just going to set another pass back to them. Again, we don't need to fire the Pot of Greed now because then we'll be over hand limit. We could always discard the Thunder Dragons as they're not really doing anything in our hand. But, you know, we're in a very good game state right now, so we don't really need to use the Pot of Greed yet. They're going to bring out a Time Wizard. Whoa, that's pretty awesome. So this is pretty cool. Time Wizard can be used in a fusion summon of Thousand Dragon with a fusion substitute. And in game states like this, it can basically be Raigeki if you call the coin toss right. So that is super sick. I really like that tech in the deck. Unclear if it's in the main deck or in the side deck, but either way, super cool. And this is another reason why the Fusion Substitute deck is so cool, because there's so many different ways you can build it, so many different flexible options you can go for, and Time Wizard is one of them. So awesome to see here. Let's see if they actually pull off the Time Wizard effect. Unfortunately, they do call it wrong, so Time Wizard will destroy itself, and Aratos will take 250. But, you know, Aratos does have a Reborn, so they do get to go for it again. So they're going to bring it back, and hopefully this time it can actually pull off its effect. And unfortunately it does not, so it will destroy itself again. They will take 250 again. Oh, and they reveal that they've got the polymerization as well, so they will be able to go for a monster here, bringing out a Labyrinth tank off of a Cannon Soldier and Gods with the Third Eye. They're going to heavy away our back row. We've got a Wuboku. We will lose a Last Will and a Heavy Storm, but honestly that's pretty fine. We've got a Fisher to deal with their Lab Tank, and Pot of Greed should be able to do it. Yep, that will do it. Bring out Muka Muka, and that will be the end of the game. But I think that final turn from Ratos was very cool, and if the Time Wizard effects did go off, then maybe this could have been a different game here. But, you know, you live by the jank, you die by the jank as well, and Time Wizard is a coin toss, so never guaranteed. Still, very cool to see a unique build of the Fusion sub deck, and also seeing Aratos make some super cool plays with it. But, you know, this match does show that Exodia still is very strong, and the Fusion deck can suffer against it. You know, if the Fusion deck brings out a big monster to beat over 2k defenders, that can be pretty good. But outside of that, it can have some difficulty outing things like Giant Soldiers of Stone, and being able to get enough damage before the opponent draws into Exodia or recruit the pieces to hand. So a bit of an unfortunate matchup for the Fusion sub deck. But this isn't the only tier 1 deck from Critter format that could still be relevant. So let's see how a Masked Control deck would do. Okay, so this is an example of a Masked Control list that you could bring in TP1 format. Again, not too many changes from the deck version in Critter format that you could bring. I think I just swapped out some Lodgins for Mechanical Chasers in the main deck, as Masked Control doesn't really play more than 3 beaters, which is why it basically is still as good as it was in Critter format. So if you've never seen Masked Control before, basically the idea of this deck is to be a control deck that leverages things like Masked Control's draw power to gain card advantage over your opponent and just control them out of the game. It's a very skill-intensive deck, a very fun deck if you play it well, and one of the most iconic decks in Critter format. In TP1 format, basically the same thing. Pretty standard build here. 2 Masked Sorcerers, name of the deck, and very powerful card in its own right. To get more aggressive, we have 3 Mechanical Chaser and a Muka Muka. Can be very good if you're drawing a lot from the Masked Sorcerers. We, of course, have 2 Sangan, 2 Witch to search out pretty much anything you want in the deck. We have 3 Magician of Faith to recycle our powerful limited spells. A Cannon Soldier to clean up the game at the end, just dealing a bunch of damage out of nowhere against your opponent when they're at very low life. We have a white magical hat here, good against Exodia. Can also be brought out off of Last Will or searched with your recruiters, and can enable you to get card advantage in a different way from Mass Sorcerer. And of course, we also have 2 Giant Soldier Stone to serve as a bit of a defensive option. For the spells, we have, of course, our Power 5 limited spells, Change of Heart, Dark Hole, Monster Reborn, Pot of Greed, Raigeki, all insanely strong. We have 3 Fissure to act as even more removal, clear the way for our Mass Sorcerers. We have 2 Heavy Storm to clear away our opponent's back row. 1 Last Will in case our opponent trap holds one of our monsters. We can Last Will out either a Muka Muka if we need a Beat Stick, or like a Mass Sorcerer or White Magical Hat if we want to get in some card advantage. Very, very versatile card in the deck. And lastly, we have 2 Swords of Revealing Light to buy us a bit of time, and also flip up our opponent's monsters to see what we're dealing with. For the traps, we have 1 Mirror Force, incredible card in this format if you can pull it off. We have 1 Robin Goblin, which can enable you to get in more card advantage, which can be very good. It is also very good against Exodia, which is very nice. We have 3 Solemn Judgment, as this is a control deck, and Solemn Judgment is the most powerful control tool in the format. We have 2 Trap Hole. I cut this down to 2 instead of 3, as more and more decks are playing Last Will, and this can sort of go against that a little bit. And also, I just find Trap Hole a bit underwhelming in this format, and in the previous format as well. It just doesn't do enough if your opponent already has an established board state. Although it can still be pretty good, which is why we're playing 2 copies of it. And lastly, we have 3 Uboku to protect our life points and our monsters, and also to potentially blank our opponent's effects of things like Mass Sorcerer and White Magical Hat. For the side deck, we've got a bunch of different options here. 2 Jiragumo if we want to get a bit more aggressive, 2 Man-Eater Bug if we want more removal, 2 Princess of Tsurugi if our opponent is on a bit more of a controlling deck, maybe playing a bunch of back row. This can really punish that. 3 Thunder Dragon if we want to go into a bit more of a Muka Muka strategy, and it can also pair well with the card destructions here, which are here for Exodia. We have 1 more Giant Soldier Stone if we want to go a bit more defensive, 1 more Trap Hole if our opponent's on a bit more of an aggressive strategy, 1 Fake Trap. Honestly, I could probably cut this. I didn't really put much thought into the side. I just adapted a side deck from a previous Mass Control list that probably fit this a little bit better. So you could probably cut out the Fake Trap for something else. Same with the Jinja number 7. This can pair well with Robin Goblin, which is in the main deck already. So, I guess you could do it against more defensive decks like Exodia. But honestly, you could probably make some major changes to this. But, I just put this together to show what this deck would be like in TP1 format. You've already seen this deck a ton in my Critter format coverage. So if you want to see some more well thought out side decks, definitely check out those videos there. And for the extra deck, we've just got a bunch of fusion monsters that we will never go into because we're not playing polymerization in the main deck or side deck. But it can bluff that we're on the fusion substitute deck potentially, which is very important in this format. Now the deck introduction's out of the way, let's see how it performs against another deck. Okay, we've got another game against Aratos, and this was a game we played immediately after the last one I showed off, so I do know that they're on the same deck, even though we're on the Mass Control deck now and not Exodia. But I'm going to play as if I don't know they're actually on the Fusion Substitute deck, just to simulate how this matchup would normally go if you were both going in blind. So, we do lose the rock, paper, scissors here, so they will get to go first, which is a bit unfortunate, but it shouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Let's see how good our hand is. This is actually a very good hand here. Let's see what they do. They're just going to set one and pass, and we can get a bit aggressive here. We're just going to bring out a witch and attack in. If they had a trap hole or something and trap hold the witch, we'd still get value off of that. And we're just going to start chipping in. If they do bring out something to deal with the witch, then we can search something that can deal with whatever they bring out. We're just going to set the heavy in main too, just to bait them into maybe setting more and getting some pluses off that heavy, clearing the way for our more aggressive pushes later on. And they are going to set another, so I think it might be a good time to activate the heavy. We are going to do that, and that's really good. They had a Mirror Force and a heavy of their own, so we are very happy with that. We're just going to bring out a Mechanical Chaser and attack in for a ton here. Main 2, we're just going to set the Uboku, pass back to them, and if they've got a heavy of their own, we can chain the Uboku. Not that big a deal. Looks like they're just going to set 3 again, pass back to us. We draw Pot of Greed, which is very nice. We'll be able to draw some here. And we can attack in without much fear, as we do know that they don't have Mirror Force anymore. So we're just going to bring out Mass Sorcerer and try and get in there. It looks like they do have Woboku to prevent us from getting in with the Mass Sorcerer, unfortunately. And they do have a Magician of Faith set, so they will be able to add back the Heavy Storm. Unclear if they actually want a Heavy Storm on this board, but if they do, we do have Woboku to chain to it, so not the worst thing in the world. And they are going to think a bit and activate Last Will. Very interesting here. Bit worrying for us. Oh, they're going to switch the Magician of Faith to attack to get out a monster from deck with the Will. Likely, probably like a Recruiter or something to hit over the Mass Sorcerer. Yeah, it is a Recruiter. So they're going to try hitting over the Mass Sorcerer. We could Woboku this, but honestly, I don't really think it's necessary. We might as well save that for a bigger push. Maybe this was a mistake, as they are at pretty low life points, so we want to get as aggressive as possible here. But I don't think it's that big a deal. They're just going to set one pass back to us. We draw a Swords, and we're just going to attack into the Witch. And we switch our Witch to defense, even though they don't have a Mirror Force. We're not playing on attacking into their set with the Witch, as it could be a Mass Sorcerer here, and we don't really want to play into that. We don't want to crash our Witch into their Witch, so no real need to do anything further. We're just going to set one of our Magician of Faith and pass back to them. If they've got Change of Heart, that's pretty rough. And if they have a board clear, honestly, that's pretty rough too. But we've got another Magician of Faith in hand if they do clear it, so not the worst thing in the world. And they're going to think about this for a bit. They are going to Change of Heart a set. Very unfortunate. We're going to think about this for a bit just so we can bluff a Solemn, but we don't actually have a Solemn. They will be able to flip up the Magician of Faith of their own. Okay, so they're getting back a Last Will with that. They're going to tribute off for a Thunder Dragon, and then Fusion Summon out a Twin Head here. Very interesting. And then they're going to Magician of Faith back a Change of Heart. Okay, and then they're going to Last Will here. Looks like they're not going to bring out a monster just yet. They're going to Change of Heart, Mechanical Chaser, and I assume that they're going to Last Will at some point in the battle phase. We could potentially Woboku this, but I don't really feel too at risk. They're probably going to Last Will out a Cannon Soldier either way. I don't know. Maybe we should have Woboku'd this just because of the Cannon Soldier play, and that's a lot of damage on board there. But we do have the Woboku, and we do have a Swords, so I think we can just save it for later. They also still have Heavy, and if they're going to activate Heavy anytime soon, we want to have the Woboku to chain to it. So I think that actually this is fine. We'll just grab a Sangan. Maybe we could have grabbed something else from deck, but, you know, not the worst thing in the world. We're going to take 31 from their monsters there, activate Last Will to bring out a Cannon Soldier in the battle phase here, and they will be able to attack in for 14 additional. They can't kill us yet with the Cannon Soldier, but they can clear away both our monsters, so we will take an additional 1,000. And they're just going to set one pass back to us. We draw a Giant Soldier Stone, which is pretty nice, but we're just going to set a Magician of Faith, as we know that they don't have a Change of Heart left. We're also going to set a Solemn. Kind of risky, as if we do need to use the Solemn, then they just need to bring out one more monster, and they win. They're going to Heavy, we're going to chain Woboku. They're going to chain 7 tools, and we do, in fact, have to Solemn this, and just hope they don't have another monster to bring out here. But unfortunately, they do, and so that will be the end of the game. I think that, honestly, this wouldn't have mattered, as they would have had the 7 tools for the Woboku anyways. So it didn't really matter if we Woboku'd last turn or this turn. They had game either way. But very, very cool play on Aratos' part. And I think this shows some of the explosive power of the Fusion Substitute deck. Being able to bring out a 2800 beater and make these huge explosive pushes is really cool. Especially when you are playing 7 tools to make sure your aggressive pushes get through Wobokus. And also having such easy access to Cannon Soldier with the Last Wills and Cannon Soldiers at more than one copy likely to play with the Labyrinth tanks is very, very important as well. So a lot of very cool things you can do with this deck, as you saw from Aratos' plays there. It can be a bit tricky to figure out those lines, but if you play with the deck long enough, then you can figure them out. And we are going into game 2. Aratos comments that that play felt very nice, and I can confirm as someone who has played the Fusion Substitute deck as well, playing it feels really nice when you pop off. So I'm always happy to see someone popping off, even if they do manage to do it against me. Always fun to see. And Yu-Gi-Oh! Is about fun, not winning. Well, it is about winning too, but fun is what matters. So we're just going to set Magician of Faith, City Trap Hole, pass back to them. We've got the Pot of Greed engraved to get back Magician of Faith with. If they do want to immediately change of heart, then they can, but that's a very risky play to do turn 1. And it looks like they aren't going to do it. It's very good for us. White Magical Hat is very nice as well. We could potentially do a Swords of Revealing Light Fisher play here if we want it. And we are going to draw 2 more to see what other options we have. It looks like this is a pretty good one. So we're just going to Swords of Revealing Light, flip up their Giant Soldier, activate Fisher, attack in for 1300 here. They do have a Boku for that, unfortunately, but we can just pass back to them. We do have Trap Hole here if they try and bring a bigger monster, but if they do Heavy Storm, that's a bit worrying, so we just got to hope that they don't Heavy. If they do Heavy, then that's really bad, but it looks like they're going to Dark Hole instead, which is also pretty bad, honestly, but not as bad as a Heavy Storm. And we are going to bring out a Mechanical Chaser here, attack into their set, see what they get. It is a Magician of Faith, so they will be able to get back the Dark Hole here. Something that we'll have to play around for the rest of the game, most likely. And they're just going to set another pass back to us. Since we know that they have the Dark Hole, we can summon out a Witch. Oh, also I should comment, as we did just draw the Man-Eater Bug, I cited in some Man-Eater Bugs, I think instead of some Defenders, as the Man-Eater Bugs can pop fusion monsters that the Defenders are much less good against. So I think that bringing the Man-Eater Bugs is a very nice side deck tech at this stage in the game. And so we're just going to bring out the Witch, try and get aggressive here. They will get a Witch Search of their own, grabbing a Sangan. But we will be able to poke in for 1100. If they Dark Hole the board away, we get a Search here, so not the worst thing in the world. And they're just going to set one, and they will Dark Hole here. They'll Dark Hole their own Sangan, so it looks like they're probably going to set up for a Last Will play here. And they're going to add a Magician of Faith off the Sangan, activate Last Will to bring out a monster. Very worrying, as if they've got a Heavy Storm, then they could get like a White Magical Hat or a Masked Sorcerer, get some advantage as well. But it looks like they were just fetching another Sangan from deck, so like deck thinning, and also grabbing a powerful monster to hand. We draw a Sangan of our own, and we could summon Sangan, try and hit into their Sangan. I think that might be the best play here. Kind of iffy. Looks like we're just going to set the Magician of Faith instead. I guess we're doing this before that they can set their Magician of Faith and get back a Dark Hole. I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about it. They're going to Swords. We will be able to get back a Pot of Greed here, which is very, very nice. This will be our 3rd activation of Pot of Greed, which we're very happy about. They're going to set one pass back to us. We're just going to Pot of Greed, see what we get here. And we draw Dark Hole, which is very, very nice. We're just going to Dark Hole the board away. And they will get a Search here, but we do manage to pop their Magician of Faith, which we figured that they'd be setting here, as they did search it with the Sangan. They get Goddess with the 3rd eye, which means that they might have a fusion play incoming, but honestly not the worst for us. We're going to Heavy Storm, as we do have an additional Wuboku in hand, and we can get a bit aggressive here. Looks like we hit a very good one. They've got a Raigeki set, so now they've lost both their board clears, and we can feel pretty good about trying to get in here. We're just going to bring up Masked Sorcerer, try attacking in for 900. We will manage to succeed in doing that. We're just going to set a Robin Goblin, set a Solemn Judgment, pass back to them. Oh, I guess we're also going to set the Wuboku. We do have protection from the Heavy with the Solemn if we so need it. Not necessarily the best thing to do with Solemn when we're at 8,000 life points, but it might be worth it given all the card advantage that we can get off of this. They are going to Change of Heart the Masked Sorcerer and attack in. And we're going to think about this. We could just Wuboku it, prevent them from getting a draw, and that is what we're going to do here. No need to let them draw into something good. But they will be able to tribute over our Masked Sorcerer for a Thunder Dragon, most likely. We're just going to bring out a Muka Muka, as that is an 1800 beater on our current board state here. And we will be able to get over the Thunder Dragon. They're going to bring out a Mechanical Chaser. And we're going to think about this because we could Solemn this. It's a lot of life points that we're going to lose here, but it will enable us to attack in with a Robin Goblin activation next turn and potentially get in for 2 attacks. So that might be worth it. And thinking about it, we are actually going to do it. And it's a very big play, but we're just hoping that we're able to get 2 discards here. And they're just going to pass to us, so we feel very good about that. We're going to bring out a Sangan, activate the Robin Goblin, attack in here for 2,800, and discard 2 cards from their hand. So that is a sick play. Unfortunately, we do hit one of the Thunder Dragons. They did have a Thunder Dragon in hand. Would have been very nice for us to hit the 2 cards that weren't Thunder Dragons. But, you know, this is pretty good as well. We managed to hit a Recruiter, and they're down to 1 card in hand, which is very nice. They're going to bring out Goddess with the Third Eye and just try attacking into the Sangan here. We're going to take it because we get a search off this, and it's honestly not that bad. If they do have like a Fisher, that's unfortunate, but not the worst thing in the world. And they're just going to activate Swords instead. We draw Card Destruction, which is pretty nice. And we've got a bit of a debate here. We could just bide our time while the Swords is up, but they've got no cards in hand. So we could just honestly Heavy Storm and try and get very aggressive here. And it looks like we are going to do that. We will lose out on our Woboku here, but we will be able to clear the Goddess with the Third Eye, get in for an additional 1,100. And they're down to very few cards. So if they whiff, then we could just potentially win here. And if they do get something good, we do have the Man-Eater Bug to deal with it as well. Looks like they did get something good. They got a Mechanical Chaser, so we will take 350 from that and pass back to them. We draw Change of Heart, which just is the end of the game here, though. Which is why we made this big push in the first place. As we got them down to operating on such low hand size and low resources that we were able to just take a game off of a very simplified board state. So we're going to go to game 3 here. I think we keep the deck the same as we did after siding. So we've got card destructions in here for if they get fusion materials to hand or have polys. They can be very good at stopping some of this deck's more explosive plays. We have Robin, we have White Magical Hat. We've got plenty of ways to pick their hand apart and stop their fusion combos. They're going to just set 2 pass back to us. We draw a Mechanical Chaser, which is nice, so we can just get aggressive right away. And we're just going to attack into their set. It is a Witch, so they will be able to get a search here. Kind of unfortunate, but not the worst thing in the world. We'll set a Woboku, pass back to them. And they're just going to set 1, set another, pass back to us. Pretty good. We can bring out Sangan, so we're just going to try and get in here. If they've got Mirror Force, we can get a search off this, so it's not the worst thing in the world. And looks like they don't, or maybe they do and they just choose not to activate it here, as they did make the Thinky face. But we will be able to attack in for 1,000 with the Sangan. Let's see what they do now. They're going to Raigeki our board away, so kind of unfortunate, but we will be able to get a search here. Looks like we are going to get a Witch of the Black Forest as a Recruiter. They're going to set one of their own, pass back to us. And we're going to think here because they did use up the Raigeki now. So that could potentially be a Magician of Faith that they have set. We might want to use the Change of Heart on it now. And if we do use the Change of Heart, then we could potentially get in some damage as well. So we are just going to go for it. We will flip up a Witch, attack in here. And unfortunately, they do have Woboku. So they will be able to just get back the Witch. And we kind of wasted our Change of Heart, which is very unfortunate. They're going to try attacking into the Mass Sorcerer. We'll take that. We could have Woboku'd to keep it alive. But honestly, we don't have a good way to get in next turn. So I don't really feel the need to do that. Main 2, they're going to set another pass back to us. We draw another Woboku, which is pretty nice. And maybe this means that we should have actually Woboku to protect our Mass Sorcerer. But I don't know. I'm still fine doing what we did here. And they're going to think about this for a bit. Must be a tricky play. They're going to activate Last Will, which is very interesting. It means that they probably have a bit of an explosive play coming up here. They're going to Magician of Faith and grab back the Raigeki. Makes sense. Raigeki is one of the most powerful cards in the format right now. And they're actually going to Darkhold. This is really neat. I actually like this a lot. They will be able to clear our monster here and also grab a Thunder Dragon and be able to Last Will out at some point in the future this turn. They'll be able to add 2 Thunder Dragons to hand, Polymerization out a Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon, and potentially get in for a lot of damage. So they're going to attack in for 28. We are just going to Woboku this, and they do have 7 tools. So we will be taking everything here, and they will be able to Last Will out an additional monster. It looks like they're just going to go for a Sangan, but Sangan beats is pretty good. So we'll take the 1,000. They'll set 1 pass back to us. And we draw another Magician of Faith, which is honestly not the worst. We've got Change of Heart, So we could get that back, but there's nothing we can really do with that. So this is kind of iffy. I think maybe we set the Man-Eater bug, but we know that they've got the Raigeki in hand. So I don't know. No matter what we do here, it kind of feels bad. We've got an additional Boku, though, to protect ourselves a little bit. I think maybe, honestly, we just set the Magician of Faith to bait out the Raigeki, as we do have an additional Magician of Faith in hand. But kind of iffy. We're just going to set 2 pass back to them. They're going to Raigeki it away. It makes sense. It's our Magician of Faith. We won't get the search off of that, but they will be able to attack in here for 28. And we will actually Wuboku this, as we are within range of a Cannon Soldier hit if this does connect. Luckily, the Wuboku actually managed to go through, which is pretty nice. We're just going to set a Man-Eater bug pass back to them. And they're going to sword, so we will be able to pop the Twin Head here. They will be able to get over our Man-Eater bug, unfortunately, but that's not the worst thing in the world. Card Destruction is an interesting draw, but it doesn't really do much here. So we're just going to keep it in hand, not do anything with it yet. And they're just going to attack into our set with the Sangan. Bit of a risky play in case we have Mass Sorcerer, but we don't. It's just a Witch. And they'll take 2 from that, but not the worst thing in the world here. We're just going to set a Magician of Faith. They've gone through their board clears, so we can feel pretty safe doing this, but they haven't gone through their Change of Heart, so it might be a little bit risky there, but we'll see what they do. Well, there's their Change of Heart. So they will be able to Change of Heart the Magician of Faith, get back a monster. Very unfortunate for us. They're just going to grab back another Change of Heart here, go for a big play, and try and attack in for 2,400. Unfortunately, we have to take this, at this trap hole isn't really doing anything. So, very unfortunate, but at least if they don't have a Cannon Soldier, we're still in the game, and we get our monsters back at the end of the turn. Or at least we would if they didn't polymerization away our Witch of the Black Forest for a Musician King. This is a really sick play that I'm a big fan of, and it's why you play Musician King in the Fusion deck, because there are niche cases like this that can come up where you want to get rid of your opponent's Witch or get rid of your own Witch to get a search. So Musician King is really cool to see this get played. Even though it is weaker than a Mechanical Chaser, they do have swords up, so not the worst. We will search out a Mechanical Chaser of our own, and Magician of Faith will get passed back to us, and we draw a Heavy Storm, which honestly I think we are just going to go for. I don't think this trap hole is going to get us much more value here, and we're at a very risky point in the game. So we're just going to bring out a Mechanical Chaser, attack over the Musician King. They will take 100, but Musician King largely served its purpose of just clearing our Witch. They're going to draw, attack into our Magician of Faith, and set 1, pass back to us. We draw swords, which is pretty nice. Could be worth playing. Check their graveyard to see if they've used up Mirror Force. They haven't, so they might have a Mirror Force, so it could be risky to commit too much to board. So we're just going to attack with the Mechanical Chaser we got. They are going to search their deck here, see what they want to get. They're going to get a Giant Soldier of Stone. Main phase 2, we're just going to slip the Man-Eater bug. We can flip this up, pop the stone next turn, which could be pretty good. And we're just going to pass back to them. We could activate swords here, just because, you know, we are at very low life. If they do have a way to deal with this board, then we don't want to die to nowhere, but I'm feeling pretty confident here. Pot of Greed makes me feel a little bit less confident here. They are going to swords, so that will deal with our Man-Eater bug, which is quite unfortunate, but nothing we can really do there. We're just going to set a Mirror Force, summon out a Mechanical Chaser, and pass. They don't have any board clears left, so they could have Fissures, but if they Fissure one of our Mechanical Chasers, we'll still have the other. And they're going to bring out a Cannon Soldier, and we're going to ask them if they're going to use Prio on this, and we don't have the trap hole anymore, so nothing we can do about that. They're going to reborn back a Witch of the Black Forest, and this is very worrying for us, as we are at 1,600. Which means that we are very close to death now. They're going to tribute off the Witch to grab a monster to hand here. And they're going to think about what to get. They're curious about whether they want to go for the more entertaining play to make some good content for this video, or go for the responsible play. Honestly, Ratos, the Musician King play was already awesome enough. So, you know, I think that was pretty cool. And definitely worthy of this content. So They're going to add a Gods with the Third Eye here, potentially pull off a fusion play later, potentially pull off a fusion play now, and go for the lab tank. But that's a bit risky. It does play into Mirror Force. And next turn they do have game if we don't have a way to clear the Cannon Soldier here. So it looks like that's going to be it. We are going to Pot of Greed. We really need a miracle here. And that doesn't quite do it. We're going to set the Magician of Faith. And we are actually going to card destruction ourselves, because we need to draw something here that can deal with that Cannon Soldier. Looks like they did have the lab tank play in hand with the Polymerization and Gods with the Third Eye. So that would have been very funny to see, but I think it's probably for the best they didn't. And we draw a Fisher, so that does deal with the Cannon Soldier, which is very, very nice. Very, very important that we got that. They're going to bring out a Mechanical Chaser of their own. We're getting a bit punished for not setting the trap hole here, but I think this is fine. Oh, I guess we are going to Mirror Force that just to clear away the Mech Chaser. And we are going to flip up the Magician of Faith here, which is a bit risky as we are at very low life points. But if we can get aggressive here, it could be worth it. They're going to activate Uboku. And we do have swords to stop them from attacking in or to flip up their monster to see what it is. But it looks like we are just going to attack with our Mechanical Chaser instead. And I think this is a very, very big mistake that does actually cost us the game here. Because if it is Giant Soldier of Stone, which we do know that they searched out, then we could take 150 here. And that does put us at a threshold where they can just attack into Magician of Faith with their Giant Soldier of Stone and finish us off that way. We honestly could have waited a lot more here, as we could just have won by deck out potentially. But we don't, and we do lose 150 there. We will activate Swords, just hoping that they don't have a heavy. But they do have the heavy, so that will be the end of the game. I think that we lost this game largely because we got greedy. I mean, Aretos played excellently as well, so kudos to them. But if we hadn't made this final play here, who knows how the game would have turned out. I think we definitely could have potentially put up a bigger fight and maybe even won the game. However, you know, they do have more Cannon Soldiers in deck most likely, so it's kind of iffy. We do have the trap hole for that. But if they Heavy Storm before summoning out the Cannon Soldier, then that would just be the end of the game. So I can see how an aggressive push could work for us, but I think we just got too greedy here, and it really came back to bite us. But who's to say what would have happened if we hadn't made this play? I think Aretos had a very good chance of winning as well. Which goes to show that this Fusion Substitute deck can win against meta decks, you know. It's got a pretty bad Exodia matchup, but it can do well against Mass Control. And Mass Control is still a tier 1 deck, I think, in this format. You know, these games were very competitive here, and we almost did win, as this deck is very powerful. This deck is also very hard to play, so I probably made some misplays somewhere along the line. So I still think Mass Control and Exodia are both tier 1, but as these games show, being tier 1 doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to win against a rogue deck like the Fusion Substitute deck. But what do you think of these games? Do you think that if I had played this game better, the Mass Control deck would have won easily against the Fusion Substitute deck? Do you think that the Fusion Substitute deck deserves to be ranked higher in my opinion? Maybe tier 1 even? Or do you think that Mass Control and Exodia just aren't as good in TP1 format as they were in Critter and should actually be ranked a lower tier than I ranked them in Critter? Please let me know down in the comments below. And until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.